Ever wondered what economists actually do? It's not just charts and graphs. It's about understanding how economies work, and that understanding breaks down into two major branches, microeconomics and macroeconomics. They sound similar, but they tackle very different questions. Today, we're going to break down the key differences between the two, why they matter to you, especially here in the US, and how they work with some simple examples. Let's start with microeconomics. Think micro as in small. Microeconomics focuses on the behavior of individual economic agents, things like consumers, households, and individual businesses. It's about understanding how they make decisions in the face of scarcity. What drives a consumer to buy one product over another? How does a company decide how much to produce? How are prices determined in a specific market? For example, let's say you're deciding whether to buy a Starbucks latte or make coffee at home. That's a microeconomic decision. You're weighing the cost, the convenience, and your personal preference. A company deciding whether to hire another worker or invest in new machinery. Also microeconomics. They're analyzing costs, benefits, and potential profits. Microeconomics digs into concepts like supply and demand. If the price of avocados goes up, why? Microeconomics will look at the supply of avocados. Maybe there was a bad harvest, and the demand for avocados are more people eating avocado toast. It also explores market structures. Are we talking about a perfectly competitive market with lots of small sellers, or a monopoly where one company controls the whole thing? Understanding these individual pieces helps us see how the entire economy is built. Now let's switch gears to macroeconomics. Macro means large scale. While microeconomics zooms in on individual parts, macroeconomics looks at the economy as a whole. It's concerned with things like gross domestic product, or GDP, inflation, unemployment, and overall economic growth. Think about the national unemployment rate. That's macroeconomics. What causes recessions and how can governments prevent them? Macroeconomics. Why is inflation rising and what does that mean for your purchasing power? Also macroeconomics. Let's illustrate with an example. Say the government lowers interest rates. A microeconomic analysis would focus on how that affects individual borrowing costs for things like mortgages and car loans. A macroeconomic analysis would focus on how that affects overall investment, consumer spending, and ultimately, the country's GDP. It's looking at the big picture, how policies impact the nation's economic performance. So how do these two interact? They're not completely separate. In fact, they're deeply intertwined. Macroeconomic trends are the result of millions of individual microeconomic decisions. For example, if lots of consumers decide to spend less money, that impacts overall consumer spending, a key component of GDP, a macroeconomic indicator. Conversely, macroeconomic policies can influence microeconomic behavior. If the government introduces a tax break for electric vehicles, that encourages more consumers to buy them, impacting the automotive industry and potentially driving innovation. Here in the US, understanding both micro and macroeconomics is crucial. Microeconomics helps businesses make smart decisions about pricing, production, and investment. It also helps consumers make informed choices about how to spend their money. Macroeconomics informs government policies aimed at stabilizing the economy, promoting growth, and controlling inflation. Think about the Federal Reserve. They primarily focus on macroeconomic factors like inflation and unemployment when deciding whether to raise or lower interest rates. These decisions impact everyone, from homeowners with mortgages to businesses looking for loans. The impacts of government stimulus checks during the pandemic, pure macroeconomics. The price of gas at the pump, a combination of global supply and demand and domestic economic factors, a blend of both. Let's look at a final example. Suppose there's a shortage of computer chips. Microeconomics would analyze why the specific companies making chips are facing supply constraints and how that impacts their prices. Macroeconomics would look at how this shortage affects the overall production of cars, electronics, and other goods, and how that impacts GDP. To quickly recap, microeconomics studies the behavior of individual economic agents, consumers, firms, and markets. Macroeconomics studies the economy as a whole, focusing on things like GDP, inflation, and unemployment. They're interconnected, with microeconomic decisions driving macroeconomic trends and macroeconomic policies influencing microeconomic behavior. Understanding both is vital for businesses, consumers, and policymakers alike. Both areas provide different, but complementary, views of the complex world of economics. Remember, this information is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as financial advice. Always consult with a qualified financial professional before making investment decisions.